My name is Alexandra Rockford. I am a CTE fashion design teacher at the High School of Fashion Industries. And today we are here with industry leader and fashion designer Lili Chu. So Lili, we are so honored and excited. Thank you so much for coming and joining and talking to our students about Career Day. We're just very honored to have you.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. I think our kids will really gonna enjoy this and get a lot of knowledge out of all of your knowledge. So let me just ask you a question. How long have you been in the industry?
It's been about 24 years now. So I graduated from Parsons School of Design with my bachelor's in 97. But I started working my senior year of college. So yeah, it's been about 24 years. So yeah, it's been long.
You and I have similars. I graduated FIT in 98.
Oh, okay. So same time frame, yeah.
Where we have similar paths. And so what can you tell our students? I know COVID is a little different, but what can you tell our students about your typical workday? Maybe we can say prior COVID, during COVID, and maybe what your expectations are after COVID.
Sure.
Hopefully, right?
Yes, hopefully. I mean, yeah, hopefully everybody's back to normal by the fall. But yes, I'm sure there's a lot of things that are different. And then there's some things that in a typical workday are probably the same because everything is so digital and remote these days with working with partners overseas at odd hours. In that sense, there's probably no change. And in some ways, it's probably easier to be a little bit more flex schedule because I think for a designer, a big bulk of your day, no matter what type of company you work in, whether it's a big corporate brand, like, I've been with Gap and Banana Republic and DKNY and these, larger corporate brands, or it's a smaller brand that's more independent. The bulk of a designer's day is answering emails. It sounds really boring, but that's what you do as soon as you come in, and most of it, you have to prioritize in your mind who you're answering first, and usually it's your overseas partners because they're sitting there waiting, and they usually have much longer work days, and so you better get them their information because they're usually working 6 to 7 days a week, much longer hours for the day, and so you feel compelled to get them their answers as soon as possible.
Yeah, and the time difference as well.
The time difference.
Working overseas, 12 hours ahead.
Yep.
They're on a different time schedule.
Yes, and sometimes, even with your own internal partners, I worked at Gap for many years, and a lot of your partners are over in San Francisco.
Oh.
So it's 3 hours difference. It's, that kind of breaks up your day too. But unfortunately, it's really important. And so, I always tell my interns, my assistants, my designers under me, I'm always checking their wording. It's really important to know how to write purposefully and as brief as possible, but make your points very clear and know your audience, right? Because it's either you're speaking to your internal partners and there's a certain etiquette of speaking to internal partners in email or on the phone. And then there's a different etiquette when you're talking about overseas partners, whether it's a fabric mill, your agent that's coordinating all your development within a certain region or country, or your sample room overseas, whoever's making your garments, you're this outsourced embroiderer or an outsourced person in India that just does knife pleating. Sometimes you have to answer these and you have to frame your answers and your questions differently because you sometimes have to simplify because of a language difference.
Yes.
Or sometimes you're holding up sketches, it's like, it's all of that, but it's really critical, especially these days. And I'm sure even more critical now because, even with your internal partners that usually you were one desk over with, you're probably having to communicate on a daily basis with a Zoom or with emails. And so it's even more important, even the way you structure an email, how you list and bullet point those things that you need, it's going to get them their answers faster and your answers faster, or your samples faster, which is the most critical. So, but it's, that's a lot of that I think the main thing that probably has changed with COVID is fittings, because a designer's day is broken up with a lot of what they call cross-functional partner meetings. So whether that's meeting with your merchandiser, your buyer, meeting with your technical team, your pattern makers or your technical designer that's sitting in fittings with you, usually with the model. Those are things that I'm sure it's a big problem now if you can't fit real life on a model or you're having to do it virtually. I know some people, they'll have the model go to whoever's house or apartment is most convenient, and then they'll do the fitting while everybody else is watching, and then they're going to make their measurements even more clear and pin it a certain way that's even more clear because they don't have that person to translate it specifically before it goes in a box and ships back to the factory.
Right. Oh my God. I didn't even think about fittings.
Yes.
That is crazy. That is really unbelievable.
Yeah.
But there a will, there's a way, right? And I think that's something we all kind of have to remember, that we'll figure it out. And sometimes it takes that team of people to figure it out too, which is great. That's amazing.
And I'm sure for some companies, it might be eye-opening because I'm sure for a lot of things, they're having to get samples sent directly to their homes from the factory versus to the office. And they're having to fit things, maybe a first sample or a second sample on themselves. And sometimes, even in the old days when you'd all be in one room, once in a while, someone would say, you know what, I think we should all try this on, especially if you have a jump size set with multiple sizes and you try it on, you're like, oh, crap. I did not even think of that, but why did I put this zipper on the hem of this legging when it's meant to be worn in winter with a boot? Like, dumb, And so I'm sure in that way it kind of helps. So there's that. And then there's also working with fabric mills. I'm sure that's very different. Yeah. And right now I consult with some overseas mills that are trying to figure out new ways to work with designers because they can't just show up and show them the new collection every couple weeks. That's a huge miss because for a designer, it's all about the tactile, the feeling it. You can describe the content all day and describe it all day, but until a designer feels it, something doesn't spark.
Yes. And to feel different, it could be the same fabric, but have different weights and it could be different.
After a long, because usually when you're seeing certain type of mills, they're showing you the raw fabric, they're showing you after wash with a softener, after wash with a stone wash, and you're seeing all those things. And now, even if a mill is willing to send you that to your home, you're not going to get as much of it because they're having to take their original header collection and break it up into much smaller swatches in order to service people these days with COVID. So you're going to get a little 1x1 swatch. It's like, yeah, I think I like it. I'll order 10 yards.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so that's that sort of stuff. But I think another thing on the flip side of COVID, which is probably very beneficial to designers, is that, in a typical designer's workday, your whole regular hours, meaning like, let's say 9 to 6, is taken up with emails, meetings with all the other people that need answers from you. And then until those people leave the office at 6-7 p.m. is when you start your design work. And so I'm sure a lot of designers are liberated these days because they have extra time. They don't have all these meetings on their schedule all day long. They can actually do their design work when they're fresh. Yes.
During the day. Yeah. That is unbelievable.
I can tell by your face, you remember these days.
Yeah, I tell my kids that, I had a 20-year career as a fashion designer. I was in children's wear. And I tell them that, I would go to the office at 7 in the morning, 6:30, 7 in the morning, just to answer email.
Yep.
And then I would pray that by 10, I'd get it done. Then I could have my meetings. Then at 3 o'clock, I'd get a cup of coffee and actually work. And then you'd work till whatever. There's so many hats to wear as a fashion designer.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really, unfortunately, all the reasons that you get into fashion design at the beginning are maybe 5% of your day sometimes, maybe even less a lot of times, unless you're in a heavy design period where you black everything out, but it's hard to even do that these days.
Yeah. Pedal to the metal and market week and stuff. So that, kind of leads me to my next question. I almost feel like I know the answer to this, but what's the worst part of your day?
Constant interruption, you know? Yes, I would say that. It's the fact that, I think a designer's job is the most abstract in some ways, right? Because, there's certain things that the planners and the merchandisers can get done and they can get through their to-do list. The designers, sometimes when it comes to the actual design work, you have to wait for that moment when you're relaxed enough and no one's interrupting you, where you can actually get your head into the creative. It's hard to switch it on and off. You know, you're doing the non-creative all day long, people coming at you all day long with questions, needing this, needing that. And by the time, you know, hopefully by 7, you're left alone. But then at 7, are you fresh enough or relaxed enough to get in that creative zone? Sometimes you're not, unfortunately.
That's and you still have the deadline.
And you still have the deadline, you still have to deliver. And then, you know, and there's a lot of times where you'd get to that 7 o'clock, you'd be like, oh, great, I see everybody going out the door. Great, I'm going to stay here till 10 and get it done, or stay here till midnight to make my deadline tomorrow. And something happens, I don't know, the Wi-Fi is down or so. In the old days back, you know, 20 years ago, you know, you'd have these like 20-page faxes to send to Hong Kong, and you'd be waiting for the fax to go through, and halfway through something would happen. You'd be like, oh God, it's midnight. I really need to get this fax through. Yeah. Technology.
I had a similar conversation about deadlines and about hard deadlines. Yeah. And that how you have to learn, and I think this is something that you just learn through your career, to pad your deadlines.
Yes.
Right? 2 days prior, so I had said anything could happen, or, you know, especially now during this time, we could have a blackout. What are you gonna do? And then I kind of try and gem them up a little bit, and I say, you know, we could have a zombie apocalypse. Things can happen, you know. So the kids start laughing. My seniors at home will know, watching this video, how Miss Rockford says that all the time. But yes, things happen. And here is the true fashion designer telling you guys, pad your deadlines.
Yep, pad your deadlines. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you have to fight for your deadlines, fight to pad those deadlines, because someone else is making the PLC, you know, the product, you know, life cycle, whatever calendar. And it's not until it's handed down to you that you really have to, you know, it's so complicated and there's so many layers of all the deadlines, because you're working within 3 collections at all times. You're working in whatever's in production, you're trying to get delivered to stores, you're working in what you're sampling and about to present, and you're working on the forward one that you have to get fabrics dyed or things prepped, you know, for concept. Right. And there's so many layers within that people don't always time it appropriately for design. Yes. And also it's hard to tell people that, you know, when they've given you 1 day to work to sketch out a whole season, you know, that might not get done in 1 day, you know, especially if you keep interrupting me every 2 years. So I mean, I would get to the point where I would do a blackout for my design team, and I literally would lock the door and put, you know, labels on the door saying it's a design do not disturb day.
Yes. Because and I think that's also a thing. You have to be creative, and you have to allow that creativity to flow within your own space, and you know, even to collaborate with other people. You know, we all can't design in a vacuum, right? You need those people to bounce ideas off of, and sometimes that's when the best thing happens, but you need the time.
Yes,
you need that time,
and you need the space. And it's hard these days because the calendars are so tight. There used to be 20 years ago, I can say very clearly, there used to be at least a few days in between seasons where you could clear your desk, you could file your things, you could work with your intern to get things going, projects to organize yourself, you know, before you start everything over again. Now there's no time. There's such a deep overlap in all the seasons. There's no time for anything. Yeah. And that's why people, you know, unfortunately, that's why at least the US industry, they knock off ideas all the time, because there's no time to try things anymore. There's no time to develop an idea. You have to have a sample to get your merchandiser to sign off on the idea and feel comfortable with it. And then you have to send that sample to a factory.
Yes.
Tell them the changes you want, but basically you have to give them something to build on because you need it in a week.
Right. Right.
It's terrible, but it's true.
Just made me take a step back a second. So talking about all this craziness, what made you want to be a fashion designer? Well, how can we get our kids to say we love the crazy?
Well, I mean, for me, I was lucky enough to go to a high school that was kind of like your high school, where it specialized in performing and visual arts.
That's
So I
awesome.
got to go to that, and that was in Dallas, Texas. And so half of our day would be spent on academics in the morning, and then the rest of the day you could work on whatever you wanted to, which I would do visual art and costume design because there was a great theater department. And so that started my love of costume design. And then I would do figure drawing, and I love figure drawing. And that just naturally kind of went into more, fashion drawing, more stylized drawing. And then I got a scholarship to go between my junior and senior year of high school to go to Parsons for their summer session, which was so cool. And I got to spend, I think it was maybe 8 weeks or 6 weeks. And I knew as soon as I got to New York City that this was the city for me. So that was also a big part of it, because a city energizes you, and especially if you either love or you hate New York.
Right.
For me, luckily, I love New York, because if I wanted to be a fashion designer and hated New York, well, that's a little tricky in the US. It's really the hub. So that's what started me on that path. And as soon as I finished that summer program, I was in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So now, did that also help you get into Parsons? Because you went to Parsons, correct?
Yes, I did. I did a part of the, me going to an arts focused high school, all that portfolio got me in. And then plus I had additional work from that summer session that got me in. And so that was a huge help. Yeah. So anything you can do. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a great portfolio, if you're going into design school, you got to show them stuff. So the more you accumulate, and also, you also have to learn to be able to talk about it too. It's kind of natural for visual people not to be good at articulating what their thoughts are, and that's normal and that's expected. But you kind of have to be able to say something, or at least be charming enough to let your personality come across.
Yes. And I feel that also the creative people, we do have the tendency to be a little jammed up when we talk about things, but I sometimes I say, but you created it. It's you. So tell me. And sometimes I can be so personal that they don't want to, but other times it could really flourish. So that's amazing.
Exactly. And I think, you could look at different arts jobs. Like for a fine artist, okay, you have to do an artist statement. Is it that critical? I don't know. I don't think it's that critical. But for a designer, at the beginning, you might think, is it even that critical for me? But yes, because as you grow, and if your future dream is to have your own line, eventually you're going to have to explain to the press and to your own PR and to your own marketing people what you're thinking. And you're going to have to tell them exactly how you want them to articulate it or spin it. So right. For a fashion designer, it is critical to be able to articulate that.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Oh, okay. So now, what type of interests, abilities, and skills would help a person to be a success in this occupation, or just even in fashion? So there's many avenues in fashion. So what do you think would be the best skill they can have, or interest?
I would say be detail oriented. I would say that, it's almost, I've had interns and assistants in the past that they can be incredibly talented. You look at their portfolio when they come in the door to interview, you're blown away by their work, but they're either sloppy, and that doesn't work in design, or they're just not detail oriented. They don't catch all these details that you need them to catch. And design is so detail oriented, no matter what type of thing you're designing. There's so many elements, even if you're talking about t-shirts, there's so many elements about it. There's the wash, there's the yarn, there's the dyeing, there's the print, there's the thread type, there's the modal, there's, whatever internal things are going on. There's some special wash or packaging process, all these things. And you have to pay attention to that detail. If you're not detail oriented, or you're not willing to absorb the detail and learn it, it's not the right career for you, I would say.
The right career. Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like that's what a lot of fashion.
Yes. And especially design, because I think designers, you're in the middle of it, coordinating with people. you know, in a sense, you could say, okay, for certain elements within a fashion company, maybe you have a master pattern maker. You know, I'm sure they're detailed oriented too, but you know, but let's say you're in a couture house, you're great at draping. Maybe you don't have to be as detail oriented about other stuff except for what you're draping, right? But I think for the most part, I think you'll find the successful people are detail oriented.
Yes, I agree. And on time.
And on time. That would be, yeah, that would be either number one or number two. They're kind of inseparable. If you're not on time, I don't care how talented you are, it's not going to last. The relationship. It just doesn't work. I've had some interns that they're just fabulous, but they just don't get that part. You know, like if you're not here, you're not going to get the work. And I'm not going to depend on you because I don't know if I can depend on you.
Think that you hit the nail right on the head. You hear that, guys? You need to be on time.
Critical.
Critical. Is there anything that you wish you might have done differently in your career?
Yeah, I would say, you know, I was always a shy kid, and you know, and a lot of people are shy when they enter a new job or whatever, or they're in school even, and you don't ask a lot of questions. I wish I had been more confident to ask the questions that were rolling around in my head, because as I got older and more confident, I realized, you know, probably if that question's rolling around in your head, everybody has the same question. And you'll be a hero if you ask it. And if you can articulate it clearly and get the answer for everybody, you will be the hero. And then people will start coming to you before a meeting or a presentation and say, hey, can you ask them about that thing that we all are confused about? You know, I wish I had, because, you know, it really makes a big difference, you know, and people usually, if you do it in a genuine way, and you know, that's also your timing too. You have to be smart about when you do that, depending on your position as, you know, low man on the totem pole. You know, be thoughtful about when you ask those questions, how you ask those questions. You don't want to be that annoying person that is just like asking questions constantly and interrupting people. But if you can find that moment where you can ask a pointed question and get what you need, your boss for sure is going to appreciate it, because they know that they're going to get what they need faster.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to make them look better. Right? And that's a great employee, when you're making your boss look good and getting it done.
That is great. So if you had an intern or a student, someone comes up to you, what would be the best piece of advice that you could give to them?
Just be positive and confident and ask questions. Yeah. You know, there's no wrong question. There's maybe a wrong moment to ask it. There's really no, you know, bad question. You know, if it's truly a confusion, ask it. Because, you know, if they react negatively to a genuine question or curiosity, then, you know, maybe you just hit it at a wrong time or whatever, or maybe they're just that kind of person. But for the most part, I think in the industry, if you're a hard worker and people see you as a wonderful team player, they're going to want to answer whatever question you have and help you as much as possible.
Yes, that's amazing. That's amazing advice. So we kind of touched on this before about technology, right? And I think this is such a poignant question, and especially now at this time. But, you know, I think that we also can see technology in different ways. We can see technology as this, right? Computer and Zoom and all of this kind of stuff. But has technology changed your job? And I feel that technology can be also down an avenue of fabric, right? The technological advances in fabrications and all of that kind of stuff. So how has that impacted or changed your job at any time?
Well, there's so many types of technology that's impacted, because I've, you know, been doing it 24 years. So it's been a big change. You know, I remember the days when if you had to send the same pattern to 2 or 3 different factories, you would have to go get the master pattern, and you'd have to convince the master pattern maker that you could do this and you could touch their master pattern, and you had to go trace it out and send it and fold it up and FedEx it or whatever, mail it off. Yep. And nowadays, you know, they have all these digital programs, and they can just, they send it off by modem. The factory overseas halfway around the world can have it within 30 minutes. It's amazing. That part is amazing. And then there's other things like, of course there's all the drawing programs, for a designer. Like I used to be pen to paper, and that's all I did. Not only for sketching, but for flats, for all the specs. Yes. I used to do all of that by hand. And I didn't learn Illustrator until I was maybe 10, 12 years into the industry. Same thing.
Yeah, I love that we're very similar in age, because I feel that our generation of people that went through, even when I would talk to kids, I don't want to say kids, but, design assistants that I had that maybe were 25, even 30, they'd be like, wait a minute, what? You used, I said, yes, it was micron pens. I taped pennies on the back of a ruler so your smudge lines wouldn't get smudged all over your flat. They are not in that connection. I said, I taught myself Illustrator. Nobody taught it to me. Now I teach the kids, but it's unbelievable how that 20 years, the vast technology we've learned.
Big difference. And even, now I see the kids coming out of school, they know, of course, Illustrator, but they know InDesign, they know Photoshop, they know all the newest, things. And I still don't know how to do Photoshop. I do Procreate on my iPad now, and that was a huge jump for me and made things faster so I could work as a consultant and do illustrations for people. But it's a huge advancement,
Yeah.
And then you said fabric too. Yeah, it's massive. All the things that they can do with fabrics now, the washing, especially, I'd done a lot of denim in my time, and just to see what Levi's is doing to eliminate water within the aging process, the laundering process, and doing it all with laser etching. Amazing. It's incredible.
It's incredible. And also, have you noticed, I didn't realize that you were so heavily into denim, but the environmental hazards too, that we're really trying to change the industry with environment.
Yes, they're making a huge commitment to it, and people have to. It's massive. People don't realize what goes into their clothing and what comes out of their clothing before it even gets to the stores. It's horrible. And I think one thing about COVID, which is great, is it has made, I think a lot of people in the industry have known all the details around sustainability and eco-friendly, this and that, for years, but the consumer is getting smarter about it, and they're going to demand companies to be more transparent about what they're doing, and that'll force a lot of people to do the right thing.
Yes,
but it's also a price that the consumer needs to be educated on the price of that. Yeah. Are you willing to pay for something American made, in a very nice factory, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I don't think so.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out. Being on a factory floor in the middle of India, would be a lot different than being on a factory floor in the middle of Ohio.
Yes, and there's ethics to it for a big company. The consumer has to realize that too. You working, like when I worked at Gap, there's certain things that, okay, you want to be in a more sustainable factory or region of India. So, okay, that can happen by next season, but that means all of our partners we've been working with for the last 10 years in these 3 villages are going to be out of work because we're so big. We've taken over all of their factory bases. Our amount of work just fills up everything. They don't take anybody else's work. So they don't have any other customers to fall back on. So now it's an ethics question.
Right.
Are you going to do that to your partners?
Right. Oh, wow. As fashion, we don't realize how much we impact the world. I don't think other people realize how much. I think we realize it.
Yes.
I don't think other people realize how important fashion is in every aspect. I mean, but we love and care for it so much that we think it's number one every time. But
right.
It really does have such impact on the world. And I'm trying to get the kids to realize more about the sustainability aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And how we can really help a lot of, neighboring countries and, with their sustainability and waste and all of this kind of great things that we're trying to really incorporate. So it's really unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Are there any other industries or positions where you could work with your skills of expertise? So you're a fashion designer, but we have, and you're also a design director, correct?
Yes.
So the skills that you've learned over these 25, well, I'll say 24 years because I don't want to age you, the 24 years of your career, um, you know, what else, what other avenues that can you go to use your design expertise in?
Well, there's a lot of avenues. First, I would start off by saying a lot of designers, they kind of specialize in one thing or the other. They feel their strength is more in the pattern making, draping, construction side, or the 2D drawing side. So my skill set was always more in the 2D. You know, of course, when you go through school, you know, you have to learn all of it, but that doesn't mean you're not better at one side or the other. Usually people come out knowing they're better at one thing or the other. I was always better at the drawing side. So because of that, I ended up doing a lot of illustration within my roles as a designer. And that sort of became an outlet when I had kids and I wanted something more flexible. I started doing a lot of consulting just for illustration. And I also had a couple jobs where I was just a concept director, which is a different skill set too. So you're really, you're within the design team, but you're pulling ideas and you're helping pull together the whole concept, and you have to do it way ahead of the game to be able to unveil that at the proper time for design, where then they can run with it and they can start developing their yarn dyes or their prints or all those things that come, you know, so early in the process. Even trims, you know, it's like crazy. You know, there's so many jobs where you'd have to decide on your trims a full month before you even started drawing anything or designing anything. It was the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
And so you'd hope at least somebody came up with a concept so you could like book some trims early because you didn't know what you needed yet.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think that that's the thing, you have to I can't even say it today, right? You need to decompartmentalize all of these things on what actually goes into one garment.
Yes.
Right? The buttons, the trims, the, you know, what the thread count is.
Yes.
All of these crazy things that you never really thought.
Yes. And sometimes the people that support you in certain specific things at work are in such a silo that they're not getting the big picture. Whereas you know, luckily and unfortunately, you're kind of over a lot of, you know, moving pieces. So you'd have a trim person saying to you, oh, I need all your zipper colors and lengths by next week. You're like, well, I don't even know the concepts. We haven't even talked about a color palette. You know, like my color deadlines are in 2 weeks. So how can your deadline be a week before the color deadline? It doesn't make sense. It's crazy. I'm taking you back. I can tell.
You totally are. That is insane. It is so insane. Oh, I love it. But we love it.
Yes. I mean, it's exciting. And I would say for young designers, you know, especially if you love to travel, it's a great career for travel. I mean, now it's a little bit different. I think budgets are a lot tighter where you don't, maybe the younger entry level people don't get to travel as much as we did when I was entry level. But still, like that's an exciting part if you like to travel and you like to see the world and you like to meet these people halfway around the world that specialize in something that you're obsessed with, you know?
Yes. I tell my kids that I saw the world being a fashion designer, and it was the most beautiful experience. And when you're in it, sometimes you go, oh, I have to go to France today. But you get to go to France. Yeah. You know? And it really is an amazing opportunity that we have as fashion designers, that we get to do the development and the creative, right? So we get to go to Europe and spend all these days and shop all day, which is the best, and then have a croissant in the morning. Right. And then we have these amazing opportunities to go halfway around the world.
Yes.
To China and India and Bangladesh and all of these amazing places. Where would you ever?
I know. I think it makes you a better human being, you know, to be totally philosophical about it, because travel makes you a better human being because you have a better perspective on what's good and bad in the world,
Right.
what works in the world, what are similarities with your culture has with everybody in the world. It's really eye-opening, you know, and it's not until you get there that you really appreciate all the hands that touch a piece of clothing or an accessory or whatever is being made that people don't realize. You know, I've talked to people, I've done consulting in the startup sector, like tech startups, and even like data platforms and things like that, where they want to know, you know, what are all the components that, you know, if someone was doing a service to filter factories and mills, you know, what would a designer want to check off to find those people, you know, based on a region or based on sustainability or based on whatever. And you know, a lot of these people, they really think there are robots making shoes and clothing around the world, and they were shocked. All these people, they're coming out of Harvard and MIT, you know, MBA programs. They really think that these you know, I went to shoe factories with them in Italy. They were blown over by how many people touch one shoe to get it made. They really had no idea. They really thought it was like a 3D printer or something going on, which maybe it will be in 20 years.
In 20 years, who knows?
Now, it's still a person, it's a human being.
And takes it with such care and love, which is unbelievable to me. You know,
pride. You see the people, they have such pride in their work, and it gives you more of a sense of pride in your work.
Yes, exactly. I always loved that you would correspond with these people for a year over email, maybe a phone call here and there, and then you have the opportunity to go to their factory and meet them, and you were automatically family.
Yes.
Automatically, you had this bond of fashion and this passion that you had, and you just sat at dinner with them, and at the end of the day, and they just couldn't be the best people, and people that you have relationships for 20 years, 30 years.
Yes. It's really humbling too, especially I think as an American, there's so much we take for granted. And when you travel and you see how hard your partners are working over there, you did not realize what they're sacrificing. You know, I've met with agents they're big top management in China, and they see their families maybe twice a year because they've made this decision for their family that they have to work in the city and their family can't be in the city. And you don't realize until you're there seeing them face to face and having dinner with them face to face, you realize what sacrifice is for them.
It's unbelievable. And that's the beauty of fashion.
Yes.
That's where you can find the beauty of it.
The human element, you know, because it really isn't, you know, iPhones. And I'm sure there's still humans touching iPhones, I guess, in the factories, but I think there's a little bit more automation there. But with clothing and shoes, accessories, there's an amazing amount of humanity still touching that product.
Touching the product. That's amazing. That's amazing. And what do you think? So we kind of touched upon this a little bit about the opportunity that we all have. And what do you think the opportunities of advancement in this occupation are? And I love talking to you about this because you are somebody who went to a high school like our kids for fashion, and then you went to college and then you pursued that. So what are some of the advancements that maybe you just have gone through? You seem like you've gone through a couple of avenues there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was one of those designers that ended up majority of time in bigger corporate companies. So advancement is a little bit more scheduled than in a smaller company. And there's benefits to both. You know, on the one hand, being in a big company, you know, there's a set HR department that's going to set, you know, a 6-month check-in with your manager and a 1-year check-in and all these things. And at every milestone check-in, there's going to be some sort of something that your manager has to do. They have to give you some sort of feedback and or compensation. You get a raise at a certain point. In a smaller company, you might not have that. You might be one of 3 people. And who knows if you'll ever get feedback directly, unless you ask for it directly, and they might, if you don't ask them for a raise, they might never give you a raise. There's the downside of that. But then again, in a big company, sometimes you're siloed and you're only working on one thing. You're doing men's yarn dye shirts, maybe for 3 years, and that's all you do, And if you say to your manager, I think I'd like to try, woven bottoms, they're like, nah, no. Whereas in a small company, you can maybe do a little bit of both. You can maybe even work on accessories. And if your dream is to have your own company and start your own company someday, you might be better prepared by having that experience in a small company and be able to see how not only the design works and the production works at a small quantity, but also how the marketing works and what are the critical people that are in a small company that you really need. Nowadays, a lot of people have a social media person that specializes in social media, even in a small company. Right. That's a new thing in the last 10 years.
Yeah. I would even say shorter time than that.
Yeah.
That it's really blown up like that.
Yeah, that it's a full-fledged career, know. So it's interesting. But then in a big company, there's more budget where you'll get to travel more, you'll get to see more places. There's in some ways, sometimes you can switch over to different departments easily because they have to post the job openings and you're on the internal website and you're like, hey, I told them that I was interested in moving over to fabric or raw materials, and I see there's an opening, but nobody told me. But now, officially I can interview for it.
Yes. That is great. That is great. And I love that. I also find in big companies, you can stay with that big company and move and advance very, very quickly. And sometimes in a small company, you might have to make that heartbreaking decision to say, I grew out of this company and I need to move on.
Yes.
And that could be heart-wrenching. I kind of look at it as a product. Yeah, right. Exactly. And but you graduated. I had this, and now I will move on. And it's sad sometimes, but it's for your own advancement. So any last words you want to? We're going to wrap the interview up soon. We are so excited for your interview, and thank you so much for being here. I just kind of wanted to see if there was any last words you can tell our students, any words of wisdom and advice from a person who has a wonderful career as you.
Well, first of all, yes, thank you for having me. It was so exciting. I love doing this. I would say 2 things. Number 1, we already talked about, be on time. That's really critical. I can't stress that enough. And I'm glad that you brought it up too. And then number 2, I would say just be open-minded. Be open-minded at this stage in your life because, I know the feeling that you want to be a designer and you want to work in this type of company, and, whether you think you're going to be the next, person doing haute couture in Paris, but be open to things surprising you. You might start in one avenue, but you might end up in another avenue. So like you started in design and you ended up in education, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And you're not going to know that at 18, 19, 20. You might not know that until you're 35, 40, and things change. Something comes up on a personal level that changes your needs, whether they're financial or workday hours or where you're living, but just be open to it, because I've had a lot of friends who fell out of love with design for various reasons, but they ended up in a much better place because they stayed open-minded to change. So, within a healthy clothing company, there's so many people that work in so many areas, and it's all a coordination game. It's all one big dance. And so everybody's important in that dance. It might seem like the designer is the star and they're on all the time and they get all the glory, but and that is true sometimes, but it doesn't mean that another job is not going to give you actually more satisfaction at the end of the day. And as you get older, work-life balance becomes more important. So sometimes you move into other jobs for that too, because you're not just fixated on fashion 24 hours a day. Maybe you're fixated on fashion 8 hours a day. And then you'd like to fixate on your children or your wife or your husband, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. So be open-minded, because, you have to be able to be flexible to change. Even if you stay in the same job, if you're not flexible to change, you're going to be really unhappy, because something like COVID happens that nobody could have predicted, and your job changes overnight, but it may startle you and bring you to a better place that gives you more satisfaction.
In the end of the
day. Yeah. So just don't be too narrow-minded with your path. It's good to focus, it's good to be committed to something, but also be open to new experiences, new people, new roles.